Yeah, hello and welcome to New Courage Skyline Talk. And the topic today is narratives. Narratives play a key role in communication, particularly in political communication, but not only, also for companies. And today we will talk about narratives and show you concrete examples from the US election. And my guest today is Laura Wright. Laura Wright is based in London, and Laura was a former journalist for Bloomberg for almost 6 years, where she was writing about markets and politics. Afterwards, Laura worked for the Secretary of State in the Department of Science, Technology, and Innovation. And today, Laura is an independent consultant. Laura, welcome. Glad to have you on here.
Thank you, Claudia.
Laura, anything you'd like to add to your background?
No, I think that's very clear. As you've said, I've worked across journalism and in government, and I'm now advising clients across strategic comms, government affairs, and in consulting.
Perfect. And Laura, in your last roles, writing or consulting in terms of narratives, a narrative has become part of your daily business. You know, maybe people who are not that familiar with communication, why is a narrative so important? And what exactly is a narrative? Maybe you could describe it a bit.
Of course, a narrative is a way to communicate your message. It's a tool to convey and summarize what you stand for. In politics, particularly, it's dominated by personalities, policies, and stories. So a narrative offers a way to tie all these elements together in a way that is digestible for your audience. And you'll notice that political parties try to tie all of their communication back to a narrative because it gives them a sense of purpose and amplifies their messaging. Also, for the general public, it's impossible to follow every story, detail, and interview. So narratives facilitate with message saturation.
Okay. So one could also say, I'm a bit cynical here now, a narrative could also be a way of manipulation, no?
It can also be a way of manipulation, or to put it more diplomatically, persuasion.
Yes, okay, nicely put. But okay, I think people know where we're heading. And Laura, if you look at the US election in the moment and the Republicans and the Democrats, I assume they all have narratives. What, for example, how would you describe the current narrative of the Republicans?
Absolutely. Well, the Republican narrative right now is Make America Great Again. Donald Trump says that you need to vote Republican in order to save America. And here Trump is reinforcing the image and narrative that we saw back in the 2016 campaign. His rhetoric that he uses is anti-wokeism. He speaks of corruption in the media and fake news. But Trump's flagship policy is stopping rampant illegal immigration, which reached a record under the Biden administration. And he also is very clear that he's a climate skeptic. His team have admitted that if he is to be elected in November, he will pull the United States out of the Paris Accord, as he did back in his first term. And also, Trump advocates for protectionist capitalism. He is a self-proclaimed tariff man. And with the narrative and policy of putting America first, it's clear that he wants to start trade wars again by imposing tariffs of up to 100% on the import of Chinese goods and up to 20% on international imports. But Trump is also clear that he is pro-business. He wants to reduce corporate income tax. And in his narrative, he's also attacked Kamala Harris's changed policy positions, for example, on fracking and gun rights.
Okay, so his narrative, Laura, has this changed in any way since Biden stepped down and Kamala Harris started campaigning? Or is it exactly the same narrative he started out with?
I think Trump's narrative has become more emboldened actually after the recent assassination attempts. He says that it's only consequential presidents who are shot at. So for me, he has doubled down on the Make America Great Again. narrative. And as I said, this is really a repeat and extension of what we saw during his 2016 campaign.
Okay, interesting. So others would say this is his political program and strategy, but you call it his narrative because this is what the focus of his communication is on. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the focus of his communication. And really, Trump has ammunition because Biden stepped down. So that implies deceit from the Democrats, what Harris knew and when.
Yeah.
Also, immigration has reached a record under the Biden administration. So that's a clear line of attack. And lastly, the economy has been weakened in the United States since COVID. So households are feeling the pressure, and that offers another line of attack for Trump's campaign.
And the Democrats, if we look at the Democrats, what has changed Biden to Kamala Harris in terms of narrative? And what is her narrative in the moment?
Harris speaks of a renewal of optimism and ambition, also a new generation of leadership and building an opportunity economy. Harris is clear that she is defending fundamental freedoms and equality, that she wants to fight against hate and efforts to divide. Her defense against immigration attacks is that actually Trump blocked the bipartisan border enforcement bill so that he could exploit the issue on the campaign. However, she can't completely distance herself from the record high illegal immigration figures because she was vice president for the last 4 years. On business, she differs from Trump on narrative. She's looking to increase corporate income tax if she's elected. But on the other hand, she has proposed offering a $50,000 tax deduction for startups and companies at the beginning of their life.
Okay, so the key narrative is change and future focus.
Right. Harris is presenting herself as the candidate of optimism, of values, of integrity, of responsibility. And she's implying that she offers a new generation of leadership, one that is different from the last 4 years. But it is a more nuanced argument because, of course, she was part of the administration.
Yeah, how believable is it, right? Many stood
Right.
there.
And I think that, and we've yet to see Harris publicly answer the question of what she knew and when regarding Biden's cognitive state. And in fact, her and her running mate Tim Walz are on course to participate in the least press conferences and interviews of any major party's presidential pairing in modern history. So there's also a narrative emerging that Harris is avoiding mainstream media, which is something that Trump and his running mate JD Vance are seeking to capitalize on.
Interesting, interesting. And Laura, from you as an expert, I mean, we've seen Trump in terms of migration talk about Haitians eating cats and dogs in some areas. Is that a real narrative, or does this have a different purpose?
This is hyperbole, but what Trump and Vance are alluding to is the fact that illegal immigration reached a record under the Biden administration. And they are also attacking one of Biden's policies, which was to allow more legal pathways for individuals from Haiti.
Yeah, but Laura, what I mean is to
Yeah.
use really this example of cats and dogs, right? Which seems a bit over the top, honestly, yeah, between you. I mean,
Yes.
is that really a serious narrative from you as a consultant, would you say, and recommend this if you were the consultant of Trump?
This is not a serious narrative, and it's why JD Vance admitted that it's fabricated. But it's interesting because it touches on the tension that is being experienced in some communities like Springfield, Ohio, that has seen an influx of almost 12,000 Haitian immigrants. But in reality, Haitian immigration is not a new concept in the United States. It has a long history because of economic and political crisis.
So do you think it will work, or does it work? Do we have any figures already? If cats and dogs works, if people believe it?
So the accusation that Haitian immigrants are eating pets is is anecdotal, and Vance admitted it was fabricated. He also said that those communities were experiencing a rise in infectious diseases, which was proven to be medically incorrect. But
Yeah.
they're looking to incite fear in communities that already feel that the level of immigration is too high. And
Mhm.
it brings back the conversation to Trump and Vance's flagship policy, which is to orchestrate the largest deportation of illegal immigrants in history. So individuals who don't have permission to be in the United States.
Okay. You know, I sometimes have the feeling the narrative of Trump is to provoke and to this way engage and increase awareness, and this way to, how do you say in English, you know, that people talk about him all the time. I mean, could that also be a narrative?
Trump is a controversial figure. He's looking to provoke the mainstream media.
Yeah.
So I think it is a tactic that is deployed, but it has roots in his central policy attack against the Democrats.
Okay, okay. So you still say this has a strategic root. It's not totally over the top, provocative, only populism.
Yeah, definitely has strategic roots. And
Mhm.
immigration, along with abortion and the economy, is one of the top three issues that American voters care about at the moment. And I think that's been compounded by a tough economic environment since the pandemic.
Okay, that's really interesting, you know. And Laura, how do you see the role of AI technology? Has this changed narratives in a way? Have narratives become more extreme, like we just said, more populistic, more on the surface? You know, many channels like X, for example, often I see you cannot explain everything in detail, right? So you often have a provocative statement which is not explained, and people are left alone more or less with it. How do you see this, particularly as a journalist?
Yeah, social media companies are on the front line of public opinion, and the emergence of artificial intelligence and how realistic the videos and images and voice can be now. It's almost impossible to distinguish it from real life. We've
Yeah.
seen a number of deep fakes over the election campaign in the UK and also in the United States. And we know that bad actors and fake accounts are growing. So to promote divisive material with the ambition of inciting unrest. And we know
Mm.
that some of those accounts are coming from the likes of China, Russia, and Iran. But the problem is social media companies just don't have the resources to deal with this problem. And it's
Yeah.
very hard to police the internet in a democracy. But it's really worrying when in the US, more than 50% of adults at least sometimes access their news on social media. So if
Yes.
you're not concentrating, if you're not aware that the information you are receiving is fake or AI generated, then that has the ability to influence your view.
Yeah, like totally. No, I agree. I mean, in the olden day with classic media, I mean, gladly enough, there is still classic media. Journalists were a critical barrier in a way, right? If you came with a narrative, so it had to be solid. But these days, I mean, everybody's just communicating. I have the feeling this also made narratives less sophisticated, less strategic.
I think you're right. Although with artificial intelligence, you have the ability to deceive and to plan how you want to influence your target audience. But I
Mhm.
think so far the level of disinformation we've seen has been quite rudimentary, although particularly on the issue of Israel, the Israel-Hamas war, we've seen fake accounts amplifying content um, from polarizing influencers, which has contributed to unrest in the UK and also America.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So, when we talk about narratives and the way narratives may be changed, also due to new technologies, And what narratives would you say are maybe have become more important? For example, how important is a narrative of trust? You know, and also if you look at Trump, for example, with all, yeah, the legal issues he has to deal with. And on the other hand, maybe like you mentioned earlier, Kamala Harris being still seen as, she's been in the party for 4 years, right, as vice president. How believable is it that she's now changing her strategy? So how important is trust and the narrative of trust, in your opinion?
Trust is very important. We have an election now in the United States where both candidates have trust issues. For example, Trump is guilty of 34 felony convictions, ranging from sexual assault to hush money, fraud, election subversion. That would be the end of most politicians' careers. But Trump has managed to use the legal cases as a platform to declare a witch hunt against him, to reiterate his view that there is corruption in the media, to speak of fake news. And since the assassinations, he's become even more emboldened, and speaks of his connection to God, which also will help him capture the evangelical vote, which is very important in this election. Like I said earlier, Harris has yet to explain.
Sorry, Laura, to interrupt. So what is the narrative of trust? Why do people trust Trump with all what you just mentioned?
Because people believe the narrative that there is corruption in the media, that fake news is present, and America is a society where the distribution of news is not impartial. So Trump's claim that there is a witch hunt against him by, let's say, left-leaning parts of the press has more believability than it would in another democracy in Europe, where the press is deemed to be more impartial.
Okay, interesting. That was very well explained. Thank you. Thank you. And on Kamala Harris and trust, does she have trust? Narrative of trust?
She's vulnerable because she was affiliated with the Biden administration over the last 4 years. We don't know what she knew regarding Biden's mental state, whether she was part of an inner circle that was hiding the reality. And there are also a lot of questions around the policy evolutions of Harris. Ostensibly, she's now pro-fracking, she's pro-gun rights. A lot of these changes of opinion, and significant ones, have happened in the dark. So there are questions on the conviction of her views and whether these really are her views, or she's saying what she needs to in order to be elected. And I think that poses a risk, because the accusation against Biden is that he's been carried by a close circle of Democratic advisors for the last couple of years. So the American public don't want to see another president who doesn't produce views and convictions themselves.
Yeah. So another 30 days to go. Let's see whether she can convince people. And yeah, so many narratives. How do you see the narrative of influencer? That also changed like majorly.
Yeah, it's been a noticeable shift in this election. I was reading that at the Republican National Convention, there were over 70 influencers invited, and that number was around 200 at the Democratic National Convention. And this is a mutually exclusive relationship between the influencers and the politicians, because typically influencers will conduct a softer interview than a traditional journalist for a mainstream news organization. And if they have a high-profile politician appearing on their platform, it increases the viewers and subscribers to their platform, but it also allows the politician to reach an audience that otherwise they might not have access to. And one fact I thought was fascinating was that at the Democratic convention, Harris only gave 3 interviews, and they were all to social media content creators, which shows how powerful these channels are viewed as a way to deploy your narrative. And I've seen some great social media content from Trump playing a round of golf with Bryson DeChambeau, which was a very unique style of content, but received millions of views. Also appearing Trump, that is, on the Theo Von podcast. He's a stand-up comedian with over 7 million followers on TikTok. So this election has demonstrated a fundamental shift in how the candidates choose to reach their audiences.
Yeah, I totally agree there with you. Yeah, I mean, the role of narratives was always very, very important, but as mentioned earlier, it has changed. What means a good narrative and what is good? I mean, a successful narrative in terms of the candidate, in terms of the party, I think the rules totally changed, right? And this is also a big change for the communication experts.
And I think authenticity is key, right? And
yeah,
politicians feel more comfortable in an environment if they're speaking to a social media content creator rather than being on the sofa for a serious prime time interview with a mainstream journalist. I think for an effective campaign strategy, you need both, but it's clear that because of that mutually beneficial relationship, politicians are leaning more toward social media content creators. And it, as I said, it helps them reach different audiences, individuals who normally don't follow politics, but follow the communities of influencers that they follow online instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, did we miss any narrative yet? No, I think we talked about all narratives. Laura, anything from your side where you say that's a watch out, we should follow the narratives that will come on the...
I would like to see more emphasis on defense spending and policy in the US campaign. I think whoever the next US president is going to have to make some serious foreign policy decisions. There's war in the Middle East, war in Europe with Ukraine, the looming question over what happens with Taiwan. And I think the US electorate will want to know that the US intends to maintain its position as the world's #1 military power. So I think there's untapped potential there to outline an intelligent defense spending strategy.
Very interesting. For us abroad, that's one of the key aspects. But I assume now in the current campaign within America, external politics doesn't play a key role. Is that correct?
You're right. The main issues are the economy, immigration, and abortion. And I think there is disappointment within the international community that the US wasn't able to generate more success with its policy interventions with Israel and in Ukraine.
Okay, Laura, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.